Hello everyone and welcome to a game a lot of you have suggested. It's a game from the chess.com's computer chess championship, Stockfish versus Komodo from the semifinals. The final remaining engines are Lila Chess 0, Stockfish Komodo or Komodo, and Lilienstein. I have no idea what that is, haven't been following what's been going on in the engine world for a while. But it features a most interesting endgame position. So as usual, when it's a game between two very strong engines, the positions are really difficult. Well, the games are usually boring, so we're only going to focus on the situations that interest us mere mortals, if you will. So without further ado, let's check it out. Stockfish opens with d4, we have knight to f6, c4, and the g6. Komodo goes for the King's Indian defense, sorry about that. We have g3, bishop to g7, and bishop to g2. So just continuing development, we have castles, knight to c3 and d6 going for the main line. We have knight to f3 and c5 now, most popular also by nowadays standards. We have d5 grabbing more space in the center, and e6 now. We have castles by Stockfish, e captures on d5, c captures, and rook to e8. And here rook to e1. Both players just continuing development. a6 preparing b5, and Stockfish of course stops it. We have a4. Knight b to d7 and bishop to f4 now, grabbing control over the e5 square, and knight to g4. And here Stockfish grabs more space on the queen side by playing a5. Very nice. So now if b5 or b6, you can always capture on b6. And here there is actually one game in the database between human players, Pentala Harikrishna versus Yassiv Durarbaili from 2019 FIDE Grand Swiss, where queen to e7 was played, and Harikrishna was able to win that game with white. But here we have knight d to e5, and it is as of move 13 that we have a completely new game. So knight to e4 by Stockfish looks a bit risky, putting the knight in front of the rook like this, but this knight doesn't have any useful discoveries. If knight captures with check, then bishop or pawn captures also protects the knight on e4. So here h6, and now queen to c1 with a double attack on the h6 pawn. We have g5, now forcing a trade on e5, we have bishop captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now just knight captures on e5. We have bishop captures on e5, and knight to d2, as Stockfish is expecting queen to f6 to go with a double attack on the b2 pawn, so knight to c4 will guard against that. And also, it's a very nice outpost for the knight, keeping an eye on the b6 square, keeping an eye on the pawn here, and making room for white to push e4. So queen to f6 with a double attack on the pawn here, also a nice developing move. Knight to c4 attacking the bishop while now defending the b2 pawn, and bishop to d7. Black continues development with rook to a3, a very nice rook lift by Stockfish, preparing e4, and rook to e3. So this way Stockfish will double rooks on the e file. Bishop to b5 now, putting pressure on the knight, saying that, okay, I can capture and then eliminate your pawn here and win the game. And white's next move is pretty much forced. Knight captures on e5, we have rook captures on e5, and now e4 as planned. The rook is coming to e3. We have rook a to e8, black also doubles up on the e file, and now rook a to e3. Where Stockfish nicely positions his pieces on dark squares, as Komodo has a light square bishop. So g4, saying you're not about to push f4 or h4 anytime soon. I'm just preventing that with g4. So Stockfish, of course, goes after the g4 pawn with h3, but now h5, keeping the pawn on g4. Queen to c3 now, so now if this rook moves, you will be able to gobble up the queen, so queen g7, and here h4. Stockfish closes the position on the king side, and now we go into something that I like to call the dance of the engines. It's something humans do as well, but when engines do it, it's just weird. So now we have rook 8 to e7. We have king to h2, improving the position, queen h8 now. We have queen to d2, also just repeating, queen to g7, queen back to c3. We have queen back to h8, and queen to d2, and the queen to g7 again. And now if Stockfish doesn't want a draw by threefold repetition, he has to play something else. So queen to d1, now allowing black to go for this f5 break in the center. So f5. Stockfish doesn't want to draw, but he doesn't consider this to be all that bad for white, so he allows it. We have queen to c1 now. And a nice trade. F captures on e4. We have rook captures, captures, captures. We have captures and bishop captures. So everything trades down. Stockfish decides that this is okay for him. And queen to e5 now. Putting pressure on the bishop here, but also on the b2 pawn here. Saying, what do you do here? But Stockfish finds queen to f4. Saying, okay, let's trade queens. Or if you capture the pawn here, then my bishop to g6 will be very, very strong, threatening check and mate. So you would have to go back, but then I just gobble up all of your kingside pawns, and then I'm just better. So by grabbing a pawn, you're actually losing 2 pawns. So after queen to f4, Komodo decides that we're going to capture on f4, mess up white's pawn structure. We have g captures on f4, and now bishop to e8. And bishop to f5 now. At some point bishop to f7 is coming, so you do want to have the option of blocking it with bishop to e6. But after bishop to e7, not bishop to e6 right away, but first Stockfish plays f3. He gets rid of his doubled f pawn to mess up the black's pawn structure. And now if you go for the d5 pawn, then after all of the trades here, you will have 2 passed pawns here on the king side. The king will go to help out with these guys here, and white will be better. So after f3, g captures on f3, Komodo captures the pawn, messes up its pawn structure, and now bishop to e6, just offering a trade here. And you can never trade here. For example, captures, king f8, you're going to go king g3, and now after king e7, f5, and this is of course completely winning for white, as the two passed pawns are now connected. So that's in a king and pawn endgame, that's winning. So f2 instead, that pawn is going either way, so engines at some point decide to give it up. King g2, king g7, and king captures on f2. We have king to f6, and now f5. So again, if there are any beginners here watching, you cannot win a pawn here. It's the same as before. If captures, captures, and captures, when you have 2 pawns here, the king can never capture the backwards pawn, because if you do, then you can no longer stop the e pawn from promoting to a queen. So after f5, we have bishop back to e8, and now king e3. White just starts improving the position. King e5, black first reaches the center, so the position of the black king is much more active, but bishop to c8 now. Now white goes after the queenside pawns. But it's not a problem. Bishop to b5. You're going to give up this pawn, but you are going to eliminate this pawn. And this, in fact, wouldn't be all that great for white. If captures, captures, you will not have any more ways of winning this with white, since everything is nicely blocked. So after bishop to b5, white returns bishop to e6. He says, I'm not giving up the pawn. Bishop back to e8 by black, and now bishop to c8 once again. Now white doesn't mind if black captures here. Then you're going to capture with check and also win the a6 pawn and create a passed a pawn. So that would be well for white. But bishop back to b5, and again we have a little dance here. So if Stockfish is not interested yet again in repeating the position and accepting a draw, he has to play something else. And here he does. He pushes f6. Giving up a pawn to improve the position of his king to grab more space. So okay, king captures and king to f4. And okay, you've improved the position of your king, but how are you crossing this? This is very, very hard to do, if at all possible. But okay, bishop to e2. Just keeping the bishop here with defense of these 2 pawns here. Bishop captures on b7. You are going to give that guy up either way. And now bishop to c4. Puts pressure on this pawn here. Bishop to c6. And now bishop back to f1. So black is asking, what are we doing here? Bishop back to e8, and now bishop to e2. We have king to e3 attacking the bishop, but now bishop back to g4. We have bishop to a4, and now king to g7. Again, they start their little dance of engines. We have bishop back to e8, and now king to f6. Bishop back to a4, and now king to g6. We have bishop to c6, and now bishop to c8, just defending the pawn. Bishop to e8, check, king to h6 defending, and king f4 once again grabbing more space, but you are not crossing any of these squares anytime soon. So bishop to g4, just continuing, bishop to c6, and now king to g6. We have king to e3, bishop back to c8, and bishop to e8 check once again. King h6, repeating once again, king f4, and bishop back to g4. So twice we've reached the position. Bishop back to a4, and now king to g6. We have king to e3, and now bishop to h3 by Komodo. Bishop to e8 with check, king to h6, and now bishop back to a4. We have king to g7, king to f4, and now king to f6. So again, the opposition has been reached. Bishop back to d1 now, going after the pawn this way, king g6 defending, and bishop to e2 now, threatening the a6 pawn. So bishop to c8 defending, and bishop to d3 with check. We have king to f6, again saying, what are we doing here? And bishop back to e2, going after the pawn, king g6, bishop d3 check, king f6, and bishop to f1 now. You have to be careful not to repeat positions. King g6, and now bishop back to e2. We have bishop to b7, putting pressure on the pawn here. Bishop d3 check, king to f6, and now again bishop to e2, saying, okay, let's trade this pawn for this pawn. But Komodo says, no thank you, I'm just gonna continue repeating. King g6, we have king to e4 now defending, and bishop to c8. We have king to e3, bishop to b7, king to e4, and now bishop back to c8. King back to e3, bishop back to b7, and now king to d2. Again, asking, what do you do here? Do you want to capture this pawn and trade it for this pawn? Again, Komodo not interested, he just goes back, bishop to c8. King to c3, we have king to h6, and now, as pretty much any move that you'd want to do would be repeating the position, so you might as well try something else, b4. So a pawn move, and now we go at it again. C captures on b4, king captures. Again, there's no way of crossing the position here, as the pawns create a wall against the white king. So king g6. Komodo says, okay, let's just enjoy ourselves. We have king to b3, bishop back to b7, attacking the pawn. King c4, bishop back to c8, and now king b3. Bishop back to b7. We have king to c3 now, asking again, are you interested in the trade now? King h6, Komodo just repeats. We have bishop to d3 and king to g7. Now we have king to d4, bishop to c8, and now bishop back to e2, going after the pawn. King g6 defending, bishop d3 check, king to g7, and now bishop to e2. We have king to g6, again king to d3, and now king to h6. We have king to e4, grabbing more space in the center, but king back to g6. King to f4, we have bishop to b7, attacking the pawn, and now again bishop d3 check, king f6, and bishop to c4 now, defending the pawn. Bishop to c8, and now comes bishop to d3. Once again, repeating the position. We have bishop to b7, and incredible as it seems, this position is winning for white. It's incredible that such things are even possible in chess. When you think you've seen everything, then something like this happens, and someone tells you, yes, this is winning for white. So if you haven't seen it by any chance, feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning idea here for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on putting black in absolute zugzwang. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to f5. This is the way you do it. You force black to capture the pawn now, because, this will just be winning for white. So what's the idea? If you don't capture, let's first explore the option that Komodo says, okay, I'm just not capturing that. We just go back bishop to a8, and now bishop to c8. You go after the pawn, and pretty much not much for you to do. You're going to have to capture, and bishop captures, and you've created a passed pawn here, which will now be winning for white. So might as well capture it right away without giving white any extra tempi. So bishop captures on d5 was played, but now bishop to d3. Okay, you go after the pawn, bishop to b7 defending, and now bishop to c4. This is how you achieve victory here. Again, black doesn't have all that many moves. If you move the king and allow king g5 to eliminate this pawn, then that's just game. So you might try d5, but d5 is also bad because of bishop back to e2. Now you're asking, do you want to move the bishop somewhere and allow me to capture this pawn? Do you allow me to capture this pawn? Or do you defend the pawn and then allow king e5? And once you've allowed king e5, then that's just lost, whatever you play. And not much you can play. King has to keep an eye on this pawn. You're going to go king d4, king g6, king c5, and after, let's say, king h6, king b6. And now this is just losing bishop to c8. You're going to play king to c6, eliminate this pawn. And black might even try and do something like this, but you can still go after the pawn. King g6, you're going to capture it. And next, you're just going to bring your king to b6, win this pawn, and then win the game. So that's what happens if you go for d5. Seems like a reasonable move, but it's really not. So king g6, repeating, bishop back to e2, and now bishop back to c8. But now bishop to f3, taking away the b7 square from black bishop. So what do you do now? Bishop to f5, not much you can do, but now king e3. You're not in a rush to go after bishop to b7. You have to prevent bishop to d3 first. So bishop back to c8, and now king to d4. Bishop back to g4 now, offering a trade. Bishop to e4, check. We have king to f7, and now bishop to d3, going after the pawn. And here, problem is, if you go bishop to c8, defend the pawn, then king d5. And after king to e7, king c6, and again, it's a similar position to the one we've had, but you're going to play king b6, win this pawn, and win the game, since this pawn is much more advanced than this pawn. So after bishop to d3, we have king to e8, but now finally bishop captures on a6. You grab the pawn. King d8, we have king to, not d5, we have king to e4. Now going after the king side, king to c7, and now bishop to b5, creating a wall against the black king here nicely. King b8, and now king to f4. We have king back to c7, and now bishop to e8. So now you can also play this and grab this pawn, while still creating a wall here against the black king, so he cannot approach your pawn. d5 by black, but now king e5, with bishop to f3, defending the pawn. But now, again, bishop to b5. We have king to b7, and now king to d6. We have king to b8, but now king c6. This check does nothing, so not much point in doing it. King a7, not allowing the king to go to b6, but now just bishop to d3. King back to b8, but now king to b6. And now, finally, that you allowed the king to reach b6, not much to do here. Bishop to e4 was played. Now bishop to b5, but still it's an incredibly impressive endgame. We have d4 and now a6, preparing a7 with check. d3, we have a7 with check, king to a8, and now, okay, it's a question, how do you break through, since the bishop is controlling this diagonal? It's actually not quite that difficult. Bishop to a6, you give black a move. Once again, it's everything about Zugzwang. d2 by black, not much you can do. You can never move the bishop. If you move the bishop from this diagonal, it's just checkmate. So d2 was played, but now bishop back to e2, guarding this square and also controlling the h5 pawn. And here d1 knight was played. Engines sometimes are funny like this. They go for an under promotion instead of a queen, since it doesn't really matter. I guess it's easier for them to calculate, since there's, even though to a human it's irrelevant, to an engine there are less lines to calculate if you bring a knight, and it's just the same. So I guess it saves resources. But okay, bishop captures on d1. Either way, we have bishop back to b7 now. You cannot hold everything. You cannot hold this pawn, since you would receive mate. So bishop to b7, but now bishop captures on h5. Bishop to c6. Bishop to c6 by black, saying, are you maybe interested in this bishop, so I can grab the pawn? But we have bishop back to d1, just preparing to push the passed pawn. So bishop to h1, we have h5, bishop to g2, h6, and here bishop back to h1. But it doesn't matter, because if you go for bishop to e4 to cover the h7 square, of course you all see how white wins without even pausing the video, I am sure. Of course, yes, congratulations to everyone, h7. You just kick the bishop away from this diagonal. So next move, it's either checkmate with the queen or the rook. And if you capture, it's just bishop to f3 mate. Well, once you block it, okay, then it's bishop captures on e4 mate. So black just played bishop to h1. Like I said, engines are funny like that. h7, bishop to d5. We have h8 queen. This comes with check, bishop blocks, and queen captures on g8, and this is now checkmate. But it all came to that moment of that beautiful after bishop to b7 to that bishop to f5 move. And yes, we will see this one once again in slow motion. There you have it, bishop to f5. Brilliant stuff. So yeah, like I said, we don't often show engine games here on this channel. We do sometimes show a neural net against an engine, so as those are a bit more interesting to me. But when it features an exciting endgame like this, we are definitely going to show it. So there you have it. That's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank David Kaiser, Sam Mendelson, Alicia Meltzer, Expanding Your World, and Don Crawford for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.